good afternoon, depending on where you are right now. My name is Joana Pinto. I'm from Zigurat Global Institute of Technology, and today we are here to present you another one of our master classes, which is a master class by the Global BIM Management Master Program. Here at Zigurat, we have several master programs. We try to have an open master class each month for each program with either one of our lecturers or a guest speaker, so that you can have a bit of the feeling of what our classes look like, and also for you to get to know in detail a bit of the content that we have in the master program, and also other projects that professionals in the sector are working on. So today we have a session by Michele Carradori, and he's a guest speaker. So thank you very much, Michele, for accepting our invitation. He's bringing us the issue or the subject of linking BIM and facility management via IFC. And facility management, I know it's a subject that it's of utmost interest for many people nowadays, as well as BIM and as well as IFC. So I hope that you guys enjoy it. I will be here listening. You won't see me, but I'll be here and I'll be moderating the chat in our platform. So if you have any questions, any comments, any doubts, just let us know through the chat and I will reply to you. And by the end of the presentation, we'll have a few minutes to reply to any questions you might have. So feel free to write down all the questions as during the presentation, and we will address them at the end. Okay, so I'll leave you now with Michele. Thank you again, Michele. We lost your camera. You there, Michele?
Yes, I'm here. I'm here,
Perfect.
Joanna.
Okay, perfect. So I'll disconnect now, and please go ahead.
Perfect. Thank you very much, and I hope you should see me, but I think I can turn off the camera so you can see my screen. Thank you very much, Joanna, and thank you very much, Zigurat, for having invited me in this webinar. As you already know, as Joanna said, my contribution today consists in linking building information models and facility management platforms via IFC. So just few words about who I am. My name is Michele Carradori. As said, I am an Italian engineer, and I am the director of BIS Lab, the research and development laboratory of the Contact Group. BIS stays for Building Innovation and Skills, and our main focus is the implementation of building information modeling and digital procedures in the building process. We work in strict relation with the companies that made up our group, and also with the external clients. So this is what I'm going to deal with in this speech. I'm going to introduce the topic focusing on the role of BIM from the facility management point of view. Then I'm going to show you a specific case study, which is the real theme of my presentation. Firstly, I'm going to clarify general aspects such as the actors involved, the tools used, the goals of the case study, the roles covered by each actor, and the final result obtained. Then, secondly, I'm going to go in depth with the undertaken process in all its aspects. So I would start my presentation offering some considerations about the building process and the role of BIM in the building process. Consider these four main phases through which the building process can be subdivided. Almost everybody nowadays agrees that the higher benefits in the use of BIM will be seen in the operation and maintenance phases. This theory is also enforced by the known fact that the costs linked with the previous design and construction phases are definitely lower than those ones that regards building operation and maintenance. So an innovation in operation and maintenance can surely lead to less money spent in the same phases. In very simple words, what we know about the use of building information modeling in the design and construction phases is that the exchange of information, both included in traditional documents and models, should occur in a common data environment, a place where all the actors are involved, and actors that use, depending on their role in the overall process, different software application as those ones you can see here. So BIM authoring tools, analysis and simulation tools, model checking tools, etc. The contributions of those different actors undertaken through those different tools led to the production of several disciplinary building information models that should include all those pieces of information needed to provide an exhaustive technical summary of the project. So the so-called as-built building information models. Now the question is, how could we make building information models really useful for operation and maintenance? And to answer these big questions, I think it could be useful to focus on other three small questions. The first one is which are the software tools involved in the process? The second is which is the system for data transfer to be used? And third, which is the data to be transferred? So let's start by the software tools point of view. As I said before, the end of the construction phases should produce as-built models that can be edited through a BIM authoring tool, such as Autodesk Revit, ArchiCAD, Allplan, etc. But actually, is the BIM model the right tool for the facility manager to undertake his operation and maintenance task? As you probably suspect, the answer is no. And the reasons are, in my opinion, at least twice. The first one is that the facility management processes are deeply different from those ones that characterizes the design and construction phases. While the second is that dealing with facility management, there's a need of a dynamic database that describes the built assets, a database that can be easily modified and analyzed, which is a feature that is not properly part of building information models. So the kind of tool that facility manager typically use are facility management platforms, often known with terms such as computer-aided facility management tools, computerized maintenance management systems, integrated workplace management systems, just to use some of the acronyms that you can see in this market. Some of the typical features of such platforms are those ones here described. So they are typically cloud platforms, multi-user platforms, and tools that allow contemporary and regulated access to the users. They are used for asset management, spaces management, and equipment management, and they allow the user to define specific workflows for breakdown maintenance management, scheduled maintenance management, and extraordinary maintenance management. They are also supported by mobile application and functions, and they also act as document management tools. This just to summarize some of the functions. These are not all the functions, but these are the most common. So now we have an interoperability issue. We need to understand how to allow a communication between these two different tools. Some of the typical, in other words, we need to define the system used for data transfer. As it always happens in these kind of situations, we see two choices. The first one is represented by proprietary data formats, such as the Revit one, the ArchiCAD one, etc. But the most interesting way, and the one that today we will consider is the way of open formats, in particular the way of IFC, the industry foundation classes. So today we will speak about it. The last topic on which it is necessary to focus regards which data has to be exchanged. And actually, this is definitely the most tough question, the one that requires the deepest focus by anyone who wants to use building information modeling to inform the operation and maintenance phase. These are just some references I choose that can be used to define information requirements. So we have the IFC standards that includes, for example, specific property sets that aims to deal with the facility management phase. Or there is the COBE standard, which is specifically thought for link the construction phase and the operation and maintenance one. Or we can use other technical standards that regard specific products or disciplines. Anyway, this can be only external references that needs necessarily further development by the user. The same thing, the same concept is affirmed also by the standard UNI and ISO 19650, which is the ISO standard for building information modeling, we can say. And this standard expects the definition of some specific documents, here highlighted in the slide, whose goal is the definition of information requirements at different levels. So the scope of this introduction is to point out that every kind of development project that aims to use building information models in a facility management perspective requires the clear specification of the client requirements. And we will see that is part of the process that we implemented also in the case study now I'm going to present you. So the case study on which my speech is focused is characterized by the presence of these actors. Let's take a look at the actors involved. The actors are, first of all, the client, who is the key player in the case study and the one who asks for the definition of an innovative procedure. Then there's the designer, the organization which is in charge of the design activities related with the specific project in which the case study takes place. Then we have the facility management platform provider, namely the representatives of the software house that produces the facility management platform in use by the clients. And then there's the BIM consultant, so the advisor of the client for what concerns the use of building information modeling in operation and maintenance perspective. In particular, the client is an Italian company involved in the fashion sector. The role of the designer is played by Contact Ingegneria, and the facility management platform provider is Infor, an American-based software house. The BIM consultant instead is BizLab, namely the team I'm representing today. So the tools in use by the client that, as you can imagine, represents a primary variable to be considered in the process described in the following slides are Revit for what concerns the modeling purposes, and the application is used by the designer too, as required by the client. Then there's an Infor Cloud Suite EAM as FM platform. I will call it just Infor EAM from now. And the logo here used actually is the one of OpenCAD BIM, which is an Infor EAM plugin that allows Infor EAM to interact with the building information models. So it is the actual application on which we focused while developing our import-export strategy. By the interoperability point of view, at the moment, the only way through which Revit and Infor-EAM can communicate from both geometrical and non-geometrical aspects is IFC. So in this case, the use of IFC in place, for example, of the Revit proprietary format cannot be considered a choice. It was mandatory. The goal of the activities is the definition of an import-export strategy between Revit and Infor-EAM in order to specify a set of requirements that can be submitted to the designer and in general to designers and contractors, with the final aim of, first of all, automating the creation of the space and equipment inventory, and linking automatically the items managed in Infor-EAM database and the relevant IFC object. So this slide is very important because these two were the fundamental two goals, the fundamental two objectives that we follow in the definition of the procedure that I will show you in the next minutes. So considering the described goal, in brief, the main role covered by the client is the specification of information requirements, of his information requirements. The facility management platform provider has to explain the actual functionalities of the software application in this specific field, so the functionalities of OpenCAD BIM and Infor-EAM in this specific field, and possibly develop the needed new functionalities. While the BIM consultant has been required to explain Revit and the Revit IFC exporter functionalities, define how to extract the relevant information from Revit, ensuring a smooth information flow, and finally suggest the development of new functionalities by Infor-EAM. Obviously, the final result of this case study is the intersection of these three variables. So the first variable is the client's requirements, obviously. The second variable is the OpenCAD BIM functionalities. The third is Revit functionalities in the export of IFC file. Those things that cannot be exported from Revit obviously cannot be part of the IFC file that Infor-EAM can import. And the fourth variable is the attempt to be compliant to the IFC standard as much as possible while exporting the IFC file from Revit. This is important in order to ensure the high quality IFC files that are as much as possible compliant with the rules of the IFC standard. So this has been the overall process we follow. Let's take a look to each single task now. The first step was the understanding of the client's requirements by the facility management point of view. So we have a list of questions to answer. First of all, which are the objects to be maintained? And the answer is special objects. So the site, the building stories, the space, the zone in which the buildings are subdivided, and then mostly MEP systems and safety elements like safety doors or something like that. Which are their useful properties? And fourthly, those ones which are managed through the client's implementation of Infor-EAM. The Infor-EAM implementation in use by the client has some specific fields that can be filled through the information taken by the models. And so these were the information on which we focused during this case study. Which are their data types? Text and Boolean data types. So we could say simple, typical data types. When are those properties produced? Some of them obviously are produced during the design stage. some of them during construction one, and also some of them in the operation and maintenance phase. In particular, these last information are out of our scope, since they are specified inside the Info-EAM interface. So they don't need to be taken, they can't be taken from the model, and so for this reason they are out of our scope. Which are the relations between BIM objects that should be mapped? The most important relation is the object space relation. So we need to know where a specific object, a specific equipment is installed within the building, within the facility. Is there an internal standard that should be followed? Yes, our client has some special objects naming conventions and proprietary classification values for objects. So obviously we need to take these conventions into consideration while defining our procedure. The second step consisted in the understanding of OpenCAD BIM functionalities. So how are objects managed in InfoCloud Suite EAM? Info-EAM allows the creation of hierarchical space database and an equipment database. So Info-EAM works with these two, how to say, sides of the moon. The space database or spatial elements database and the equipment database. Are these databases linked together? Yes, obviously. And in particular, there's a specific field in the equipment database that allows the link of each object with the relevant special object. Our objects identify in these databases through an unique ID that Info-EAM associates to objects, to items in general, when the item is creating inside the special database or the equipment database. What can be done when we started developing this procedure with the imported IFC file? It was possible to visualize the IFC file geometry and the information related to each object. And can the user link the items in the equipment database with the relevant IFC object? So, how to say, create a link between the graphical aspect of information and the same information included in info database? The answer is yes, but at that time the association was manual, so the user has to spend not a few time to create this relation, this association. Is there any other way to fill in the space and equipment database? A different way from the one of creating items manually? And the answer again is yes, through the import of an Excel file with a specific plugin that we will see in the next slides. The third step regarded Revit and the Revit IFC exporter functionalities. So the answer in this case were these ones. Can Revit produce an FC file that fulfills the requirements? Once known the requirements, we can answer to this question, and the answer is yes. Which Revit parameters are needed? So to answer this question, we need to have some basic knowledge of how Revit works, but we can say that it is necessary to use built-in Revit parameters, so parameters that are already in the Revit interface independently from the project we are managing. And we need built-in parameters and shared parameters. Shared parameters which are both user-defined, so created from us while developing this procedure, and other shared parameters that are taken from the specific Autodesk shared parameters file for IFC export. not everybody knows the existence of this file, but Autodesk has set a shared parameter file that is extremely useful when we want to export IFC file from Revit. So we will then see it, and my advice is to go in depth on this theme if you are Revit users and IFC users. Then which IFC property sets have to be used? In this case, we need to use user-defined property sets, since the standard property sets, the ones that are already in the IFC standards, were not specific enough to address the specific requirements of our client. And how can be Info-EAM and Revit objects linked together? We will see that the link between the object in Info and the object in Revit can be realized through the IFC grid. So the unique ID, which is automatically generated for each object while exporting an IFC file from Revit, but from any kind of BIM authoring tool that you can imagine. Once this fundamental input information had been clarified, it was possible to design an information exchange plan to be further developed in the following task. So the procedure starts from a Revit disciplinary model, which is filled in with both built-in and shared parameters, as I said before. The parameters used wants to specify codes and types of the spatial structure elements, and regarding physical objects, a series of information like, for example, the type, the code, the category, manufacturer, barcode, serial number, etc. So just to give you some examples of the kind of information we managed during this case study. While exporting the IFC file from Revit, instead, two property sets are associated with the relevant spatial and physical objects to be managed. These property sets are named pset info EQ, as you can see in this slide, for equipments, and pset info SPE for spaces and special objects in general. And the objective, our objective was that these property sets should be associated to only those objects that need to be maintained. We will see in the next slide why we want to reach this objective. The outgoing IFC file is then imported in Info-EAM through the OpenCAD BIM utility, the ones that I was mentioning before. And while importing the IFC file, OpenCAD BIM maps the properties included in the IFC property sets to the relevant Info-EAM fields, creating the items that fills the equipment and the space databases inside Info-EAM. Therefore, the user is not required to manually generate these items in the Info-EAM interface. So this was the information exchange plan that we would like to follow in order to complete the procedure, the overall flow, and reach our objectives. Anyway, if the users needs to add additional information, it could happen. It is possible to extract the mapped data in an Excel file, external Excel file, including those additional information, and then upload the Excel file through another existing plugin called EAM Import Utility. This was the typical plugin, the typical utility that Info users normally use for transfer data in Infor in order to, for example, create the item in the special and equipment database. The use of an Excel file represents the most efficient way to generate the items when it is not possible to use building information model for the same objective. But since some information, as said before, are produced or updated during the operation and maintenance phase and inside the Infor-EAM interface, an important question is how to link Infor-EAM objects and Revit objects in order to ensure bidirectional information flow, and so ensure that the BIM model is always or at least can be always maintain update with the information stored within Infor-EAM. Our strategy is the one that I'm going to explain you now. While exporting an IFC file, the Revit IFC exporter allows to store each object's IFC GUID in a specific Revit parameter. Probably most of you know this kind of functionality of the Revit IFC exporter. When an Infor item is created, both special and physical, Information-EAM gives each new space and equipment a unique ID, as I told you before, but it still keeps a record of its IFC GUID. So then, when the informative content of both space and equipment databases can be extracted as a CSV or Excel file, including the IFC GUID of each space and equipment, it is possible to take those pieces of information that has changed and link them together with the relevant object by the means of the IFC GUID. And so those information and so the IFC GUID, which is also stored in the Revit file, can be used to fill in the right parameters within the model. This can be done, for example, implementing some simple Dynamo scripts in the case of Revit. After having designed the described information exchange plan, the first question to be answered was, do new OpenCAD BIM functionalities need to be developed? Obviously, the answer is yes, and the new functionalities to be developed regarding the mapping activity. Obviously, this kind of activity was not undertaken by me or in place of the BIM consultant, but it was a great activity made by the developer of OpenCAD BIM in Italy. So, in particular, the scope of this new development was automate the mapping, so automate the process in which the properties included in the IFC database are mapped into the Infor-EAM database. And this kind of automation has been done by taking into account only those objects to which is associated the predefined property set. As I told you before, we define some specific property set. We would like that those property sets are linked, are associated only to those objects that require to be maintained. And so in Infor-EAM, in particular in OpenCAD BIM, we could select those elements that we want to include also in the Infor-EAM database by choosing only those IFC objects that are associated with the property sets we defined. And also we want to automate the mapping by the means of identifying automatically the link between IFC properties and Infor-EAM fields in order to ensure that the right IFC, the value of the right IFC properties fills in the value, the value of the right Infor-EAM fields. Moreover, we wanted to give the user the ability to modify the default mapping. selecting other info-EAM fields rather than those ones associated to the IFC properties by default, or, for example, give the user the ability to change the rule through which the OpenCAD Beam plugin realize that default mapping. So after the development of these functionalities, we went ahead testing this solution with the example IFC models and revisioning the defined plan where needed. So part of the shared parameters included in the Revit models were taken from the Autodesk IFC export shared parameter file, as said you before. This file is commonly used by Revit users, and so we did, to insert shared parameters that automatically fill in IFC entity attributes once the Revit model is exported in IFC format, in order to ensure the quality and compliance of the IC file. Some of these shared parameters are also used by us to fill in a precise properties of the user-defined property set. Just to give you an example that can clarify what I said, it is the case, for example, of the shared parameter IFC tag, which was used to fill in both the tag attributes of the relevant IFC entities and also the serial number property included in the pset info-req property set. The other part of the shared parameters included in the Revit model were instead taken from a user-defined shared parameter file. This shared parameter file includes all those parameters that are needed to pursue the client's requirements and that are not included in Revit as built-in parameters or in the Autodesk shared parameter file I mentioned before. As you can see in this slide, the user-defined parameters have been named similarly to the info-EAM fields they refer, just adding the suffix EAM at the end of the parameter name. This is useful for the client and the designer and contractor to understand which are the parameters that needs to be filled in order to ensure a smooth information flow towards info-EAM. Let's take a look now at how it works, the creation of the defined property sets from Revit. So in particular, using Revit, it is necessary to set a user-defined property set mapping file, which states the name of the property set, in this case, pset info-req, the name of each property included in those property sets, and the name of the relevant Revit parameter from where the value should be taken. So in this example, as I said, the defined property set is pset info-req, and it applies, as you can see in the highlighted row, to all the sub-entities of IFC elements. These sub-entities are more or less all the objects that you can imagine in a building information model. The property set is exported only if at least one of the properties is filled in. So it means that if no one of these parameters are filled in Revit, this specific property set is not associated with no one of the sub-entities of IFC element. In the property set 2, the properties are named similarly to the info-EAM fields they refer. Looking in more detail the content of this property set mapping file, it is possible to notice that some of them are mapped from built-in parameters. In this case, the properties manufacturer EAM and model EAM are filled in with the values of the built-in parameters manufacturer and model that you know is part of every Revit model you can create. Some of the properties instead are mapped from Autodesk shared parameters. Is the case of the IFC tag parameters or IFC description parameters. And the major part of the property set is made by properties that takes the value from the user-defined shared parameters we introduced in the Revit model. Let me make a focus on the space EAM properties, because this property provides the relation between an equipment and the space in which it is installed. It will be used by Info-EAM to create a relation between equipments and the spaces database. It is the property I was mentioning before when speaking about the relation between the spaces and equipments database in Info-EAM. The next step consists in the import of the IFC file in Info-EAM through OpenCAD BIM and the mapping of the properties to the Info-EAM fields. So the user has to execute the login, to select the IFC file and upload it to Info-EAM. OpenCAD BIM then shows the property sets included in the imported IFC file. In this case, OpenCAD BIM just find two different property sets. Then the user selects the objects to map by selecting the relevant property sets. In our case, pset Info-EQ for equipments and pset Info-SP for spaces. The example here represented is related to another case study, but in our case study we will select pset Info-EQ and pset Info-SP for spaces. Following the information exchange plan defined and previously described, the selected property set should be linked with only those objects that need to be maintained, as I said before. So by selecting the property set, we are also selecting the objects we want to map in Info-EAM. Then OpenCAD BIM automatically associates a relevant mapping table to its property set, which is identified in this image by the code in the EAM import utility model column. The user can then check the default mapping table, which is in its turn defined following a rule. So, for example, considering that the name of the relevant IFC properties is equal to the name of the Info-EAM plus a fixed suffix. This was the reason why we create the property set using the same name of Info-EAM fields, just adding a suffix key, which is EAM, in order to simplify the mapping, the automatical mapping made by OpenCAD BIM. The user can also modify the default mapping template, deciding which Info-EAM field is filled in with which IFC property. Regarding the last step of the defined procedure, when the spatial and physical assets are created in the info database using data extracted from the IFC model, it was chosen to make mandatory to pass through the extraction of an Excel file. This was chosen because the FM platform provider affirms that this is the procedure that the major part of its clients would prefer, and also because it allowed the user to, for example, exclude elements which has the property set associated with it, but are not part of the scope by a facility management perspective. So the extraction happens by clicking Export XLS for import utility, as highlighted in this slide, and the outgoing Excel file can be then checked, possibly completed with additional information where needed, and finally upload using the existing EAM import utility with this utility. So this is at the end the procedure we defined and the external resources needed to undertake it. So in Revit, we just need the user-defined shared parameter file, the user-defined property set mapping file, and the Autodesk IFC export shared parameter file. After the testing phase, it was possible to specify in detail the IFC export procedure to obtain useful IFC models from the Revit disciplinary models produced by designer and contractors during the building process. And these are some extracts of the documentation that has been created that needs to be clear enough to allow designers and contractors to understand all the procedure we thought and we defined. So now the tool is ready and tested. The requirements are, we hope, well explained, and now we are here and we are waiting to see the results of the application of this procedure on a real project that is ongoing. Thank you very much, and I hope to having respected the schedule. And if you have any kind of question, I'm pleased to answer. I hope Joanna is here. Joanna, can you hear me?
Yes, sorry. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, sure. I can hear you.
Okay, perfect. Sorry, Michele. I see that we have no specific questions at the moment. Give me a second. Yes, we do. Sorry. There we go. Question, Michele. How can structural engineering contribute to facility management? How can a structural engineer be useful in facility management?
Do you ask me about structural engineer?
Yes.
Okay, but actually, the discipline of structural engineer are the typical discipline that is not that much affected by facility management objectives, because facility managers most commonly focused on the active parts of the building. I mean, MIP parts, for example, like HVAC parts, plumbing systems, etc. While the structural and architectural part of a building, a general building, often are not so affected by facility management aspects. But an example that comes to me is the load-bearing or not load-bearing feature that can be defined for structural elements, because while using a building, while using a facility, it is important for example, tenants or in general users of a building, knowing which is the load that, for example, a slab can support, and in order to understand if they can use that building story for specific purposes or not. So this is the most peculiar reason for which I think structural engineers can be interesting in facility management requirements. While the biggest part actually, yes, is related with systems, with MEP systems.
Perfect. Thank you, Michele. I have here Giuseppe Del Monte saying, good job, Michele, just for you to know. And
Okay.
we have a question also from Siddharth. How do you decide for exporting information from a tool other than Revit, for example, ArchiCAD?
Actually, Revit was the tool that the clients decided to ask to all the designers and contractors that worked for him. So it was one of the starting point we received from our clients. And the nice thing of the procedure, sorry, that we define is that that if tomorrow the client decided to keep the designer free to use Revit or ArchiCAD, this procedure can work in any case because it's based on IFC. So every BIM authoring tool can export IFC files. So if the client changes mind about the BIM authoring tool to use, the procedure works at the same time. It was one of our starting point. It was not our choice to use Revit.
Okay, very good. Thank you for that. Let me see. Next one, Juan Rodriguez. How easily will this project be extended to requirements coming from other clients using the same facility management platform?
Actually, I think is simple because the platform. I don't know very much the platform. I know this implementation, this specific implementation, but works with some specific fields that I think a client can decide to manage or not. But I know that the guys that develop OpenCAD BIM, which is the plugin for interact with big information model, already has defined a general procedure that allows their clients to interact with this plugin independently from the specific project or client. They just have to name the parameters in a certain way, following the same name of the fields that are part of this platform, and the procedure is working. So yes, actually, I think this project has been very useful, not only for our client but also for the developer of this software, because with through collaboration we managed to reach I think a good result.
Collaboration is the key.
Yes,
Indeed, we have
again
again. We have another question from Nicola. The Infor EAM choice was to insert data from OpenCAD BIM to Infor EAM by Excel. In your opinion, couldn't be more interesting to do that using advanced filters, exporting the IFC not to include elements those are not relevant for facility management, and directly push them in Infor EAM from OpenCAD BIM?
I'm sorry, I think I have some issues with the audio. Can you repeat, maybe subdividing the question so I can answer one?
Yes, it's very long. Nicola says that the way you chose to insert data from OpenCAD BIM to Infor EAM was by Excel. And if in your opinion, it wouldn't be more interesting to do that using instead advanced filters, exporting the IFC not to include elements that are not relevant for facility management. So it means directly push them in Infor EAM from
Sure.
OpenCAD BIM.
I understood. Yes, actually, this was one of the topic we discussed during our collaboration. I think this is just one of the first steps in the development of OpenCAD bin. So I'm sure that this procedure can be further developed, maybe adding some additional abilities in filtering the IFC file and directly fill in for EAM. At the moment, knowing their clients, probably OpenCAD bin developers knows that they probably need to see a sort of interface that is more familiar with them, and can be maybe and also it can be used to correct maybe the wrong things that can be found in the IFC model. So I think this kind of implementation is also has also been decided in order to take a solution that maybe is not the most efficient, but it can ensure the final result to every client. But sure, the filtering system can be additionally developed, can be made more smarter. Yes, this implementation is linked to the intersection, as I said at the start, of many variables that can be discussed in each project. I hope having answered, but if not, we can. You have my contacts, I think. So if someone wants to go in depth on some details, I'm pleased to answer also apart from this webinar.
Perfect. Thank you very much for that, Michele. I will share the email if you want afterwards to everybody. We have another question from Jesus. I understand that this process is able to do with any 3D software, not only with Revit, right?
Mm-hmm. Well, yes, it works independently from Revit, definitely.
Perfect. Then.
Yeah, yes, because it's based on IFC. So the only thing, sorry, to check is the way to and that need to be focused is the way through which information can put back in the Revit model in our case, but also in the ArchiCAD model if it's ArchiCAD. But I don't think it's an issue, since the IFC grid is an information that I think it can be known also in software like ArchiCAD or other things.
Okay, because he was asking because it's easy to find lots of different software overall in Mac, so that was the reason why. Siddharth asks also, what are the other formats that can be used to integrate data from BIM files other than IFC to integrate BIM model to facility management tools? Like IFC XML files, for example.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, apart from proprietary formats, we don't, let's take apart this scenario. Actually, what I know differently from IFC by a tool that can transfer both geometrical and non-geometrical information. Actually, I admit I don't know other tool. I know systems to transfer information, not graphical information, and standards for transfer non-graphical information based on XML, like for example the COBie standard. But the COBie standard actually is not able to at the moment, at least in XML format, at least is not able to transfer geometrical information. So it does something different than what IFC does. So Yeah, I know that some FM platforms are developing and developed some plugins that are able to, for example, import directly the Revit file. But surely that kind of approach works perfectly, probably with Revit, but it does not work at all with ArchiCAD, obviously. So it's also a business choice, a commercial choice. I don't know how to say by the FM platform providers.
Perfect. Thank you. Let's go on. We have here Juan. What were the main flaws of the default IF standard properties that were missing and made it necessary to resort to custom properties? Was Kobe export taken into consideration?
So Kobe was not taken into consideration, not because I or we do not believe in the good quality of the Kobe project, but because we will try to find out also the solution that could be most easily implemented by the many different designers and contractors the clients normally refer. So using few property sets, using a few parameters in Revit, and defining as simple as much as possible procedures was one of our need. Some of the properties included in our user-defined property sets actually can be transferred using standard property sets, but not all of them, because they are extremely specific, or they are specific of the specific software or the clients. So we should use other parameters that were not aligned with the meaning of the parameter we need. So we decided to use only user-defined parameter, even if we know that is not the most compliant choice, in order to simplify as much as possible the modeling and mapping activity while exporting IFC.
Okay, thank you. Michele, do you have a few minutes more? We have 3 more questions.
Yeah, sure. Yes. Unfortunately,
Okay.
I cannot see the question in the chat. So, but it's not a problem.
It comes to me, but I will read it out to you. Mikael asks, was this framework, has this framework been applied to an infrastructure project?
No, because the client is it's not public administration or somebody that deals with this kind of project. So also the implementation of the facility management platform used by the client is not infrastructure specific. So it's different field. It's a different field of work. So yeah, it should be. I think it should be strongly revised if we want to apply it to infrastructure projects.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. Then Marta asks, well, she says, thank you very much for the webinar, Michele. Local authorities in Spain are trying to implement BIM in design and construction phases, but there is already a great gap with facility management. This is more a comment than a question.
I think actually if I can, I would add my 10 cents to this comment, because I think the most important obstacle to use building information modeling for facility management purposes is that the major part of the clients are not so conscious of the information that they want from technical drawings, technical documentation, such as the models. Before of trying to implement BIM in order to satisfy facility management requirements, we need to define the requirements, okay, and include them into documentation such the employer information requirements, or I don't know how you call it in Spain, but yeah, specify these requirements, and obviously have tools such as the one I presented today that is able to manage models during the facility management phase.
Perfect. Thank you for the comment. And another one from Mala. Great presentation, Michele. I think only the tagged items could help the facility management team to check the warranties or replacement of equipment parts in the form of alerts. But is there any way to give the non-tagged elements certain maintenance works like cleaning, inspection, or storage tanks?
The question is we can extract this information from the model, or if we can manage this information within the facility management platform.
It's a good question. Mala, do you want to clarify? Within the plant.
Within the plant.
The platform, you mean, no, Mala?
Ah, okay.
The facility management platform? Yes.
Okay, perfect. But so actually, this is a typical kind of functionality that this kind of platform has. I mean, once you have create the item within the platform, then you can manage it within the platform, inside the platform. So you can add operation and maintenance tasks. You can register the events that regard that item. You can ask a worker to do something on that asset, and the benefit to have a model linked with the item is the possibility to go from the model to the item in the database, from the item in the database to the model, to see where it is, how it is composed of elements, etc. So yes, this is the functionalities mentioned are the typical functionalities of facility management platform.
Okay, understood. Thank you very much. And there we have Giuseppe Del Monte, Infor Cloud Suite. It's the following, the continuation of the previous question. Infor Cloud Suite EAM is a leading product globally provided by Infor, named as leader within Gartner's Magic Quadrant. This is just a comment from Giuseppe to his previous question.
Actually, Giuseppe, you can see here in the slide, is the guy that collaborates with me developing the part
okay.
the facility management platform. So his comment is definitely right, because he is the guy that was responsible for all the part that regards Infor EAM.
Okay, perfect. So we only have one last question from Guy Chavid. what interface, which is quite of a broad one, what interface for the daily work does the facility manager use? This would be an opinion maybe of a tool if you want.
Which is the interface that the facility managers use? This is the question?
Yes, for the daily work.
It's the interface that the facility management platform gives to the facility manager. So actually, there are many people that deals with facility management in an organization such as the one that we refer to our clients. So each person that are a part of the facility management office could potentially have a different interface depending on his role. So it's up to the specific solution used by the facility management office, and also in most cases to the specific role covered by each user.
Okay, perfect. I think that's all. Let me check. No, Siddharth has one last question. Okay, how can we query an IFC file to create a database for basic information from BIM files using languages like Python?
I think this is a tough question. Can you repeat the first part? Sorry, because I just heard about IFC and Python, and this makes me say it's a tough question, but I want to know all the questions.
Okay, no, Siddharth was asking, how can we query an IFC file to create a database for basic information from BIM using Python?
Yes, this is definitely not simple question. What I can say is that if you want to query an IFC file, there are plenty of also free software that allows you to make query to the IFC file. Actually, I must admit that I cannot answer so specifically on the use of Python applied to IFC files.
Okay, that's fine. Siddharth says that it's because a lot of facility management tools have Python or SQL for querying, and that was why the question was made. Okay, thank you very much.
I think it's a question. Sorry, I think it's a question that should be asked to the developer of this platform. Actually, my work is much more related to the process and the definition of the process. So I can turn this question to developers that I know. So yes, I take note about this question.
Sure. Can we please have the email? Should I use the email that I have from you, maybe to give to these people that that want to make any more questions, or maybe I'll.
The first slide as the questions. Maybe I can just wait a second. Unfortunately, there are a lot of slides. So just 1 second.
Sure.
Here it is. So this is my email. It's not so simple, so I preferred to show you.
Perfect. Thank you, Michele. Let's do the following. I'll ask my colleagues to post also about this masterclass in LinkedIn. So anybody that has any questions, and we'll tag you, Michele, so that people can also reach you via LinkedIn if they wish. Okay?
Sure. Perfect.
Thank you very much for hanging in there another extra 16 minutes and for being with us today. And for everybody else that is still here, thank you very much for participating and staying connected. We'll be sending you an email afterwards also. And if you want to know any more information about the Lead Management Master Program or any other program you might be interested in, then just let us know. And meanwhile, we'll give you a way of connecting with Michele also. So Michele, thank you very much.
Thank you too, and bye everybody.